Hello and welcome to Tap That MTG, the show where we tell you everything we know about Magic the Gathering that's probably wrong, but fun to talk about. I'm Leslie.
And I'm Shauna.
And today we are going to bring you another pre-con deep dive. This one we're talking about today is Dungeons of Death. It's from the new Adventures in the Forgotten Realms. And we are going to break down this deck, talk about all the cards that come in this pre-con, what they do, and how we feel you should play this deck wisely. If you wait till the end, we'll have some suggestions for tweaking and things like that for you. So, Shauna, why don't you tell us about this deck's commander and what this deck is meant to do?
So this is Sephris of the Hidden Ways for white, a blue, and a black. It's a 2/3 wizard. Some wizarding going on here. And whenever one or more creature cards are put into your graveyard from anywhere, you get to venture into the dungeon. What is the dungeon? This ability triggers only once each turn. It's also got Create Undead. So whenever you complete a dungeon, you get to return a creature card from your graveyard to the battlefield. So I'm excited about lots of graveyard shenanigans. That's basically what this deck is doing. So we're going to talk about dungeons here in a minute, but basically, this deck is all about going through the dungeons, getting all the benefits of the dungeons, and then getting your creatures back. So, wow, this is going to be awesome.
And how does venturing work?
How does venturing work? So, venturing, you get these dungeon cards, and they're just, you can just have them. They're tokens. There's 3 dungeons possible. There's the Lost Mine of Phandelver or something like that, Tomb of Annihilation, the Dungeon of the Mad Mage. So these are new to the to this set. So when you venture, you go into one of these dungeons. You can only have one at a time. And each time you venture, you either go into the dungeon or you move down one. And so as you go through the dungeon, there's things that happen. Some of them are choices. And once you have finished that dungeon, it is immediately gone away. And then the next time you get told to venture, you can start the same dungeon or do one of the other ones. So it's very fun. I'm excited.
Yes. I'm excited about this deck. I want to get this deck just because it's different than anything I have already. So I like that. Yeah. So before we deep dive into all of the cards, we thought we'd talk a little bit about what makes up this deck. So our mana curve is fair. Well, I don't want to say it's low. There's a lot of cards at 3 mana value, which is good. We have 4 at 1, 11 at 2, 20 at 3, and then we have approximately 26 above that. So 8 at 4, 8 at 5, and 10 at 6. So I would say it's a fairly balanced mana curve. As far as colors in this deck, we have 9 black, 14 multicolor, 13 white, 12 blue, and 13 colorless. So around the pie, it's fairly even. There's a few less black cards, but for the most part, there's about the same amount of all the rest. And for card types, we have 34 creature cards, which is actually quite high. Sorceries and instants, we have 12. Enchantments is 3, and artifacts is 12. And a lot of those artifacts are going to be like your mana ramp and mana generator ones. So that's the breakdown of this deck. And in looking at the breakdown, we can tell a little bit about how we might want to tweak later on, as well as some of those things. But speaking of how we want to tweak and how we decide on that, what do we use to kind of figure out whether this is a good deck or not?
Well, we have this little formula that we've been using for a while now that has worked well. It seems that the precons pretty much match it, as well as other decks that we've made. We kind of follow this formula. So, of course, you have your commander, and then you've got your ramp cards. So about 15 of those, about 15 removal cards, because you got to make sure you have lots of removal whether it's targeted or artifact enchantment removal or board wipes. You want that stuff too. Card draw about 13 because you got to keep your hand full, especially in Commander. You got to have options. And then we've got, the high impact cards that are going to win you the game, about 12 of those, and then other cards that either support your theme or your commander or other win conditions, things like that. There are about 10 of those, and then around 34 lands, and that's usually a place where you can tweak in the precons for sure. Okay. So so that fluctuates a little bit, and we're going to go through each of those sections one at a time. So Leslie, what's our first section?
Well, our first section is one of the important things, because if you don't have land, you don't get to play anything. So it's our ramp and mana generators.
Yeah.
Our formula says about 15. This deck has about 10, so it's a bit low on that. So you might want to add a few more. Again, that depends on your preference, but Solemn Simulacrum is our first one. It's a 4 mana, cost 2/2. When it enters the battlefield, you get to search your library for a basic land card, put that onto the battlefield, and then shuffle. And then when it dies, you get to draw a card. So there's 2 benefits there from Solemn Simulacrum. First is ramp, and then is draw.
And I'm glad she had to say that, because I can never say that word.
Simulacrum?
Never can. I don't know what it is. Burnished Heart for 3. It's a 2/2 little elk creature that you can pay 3 and sacrifice it and go looking for 2 basic land cards and put them onto the battlefield, tap, then shuffle. So poor little thing has to die all the time.
Yeah,
but it's pretty awesome.
It's okay. And Arcane Signet is a nice staple in Commander. It's a 2/2, it's a 2 mana cost artifact that taps for 1 mana of any color in your commander's color identity.
And Commander Sphere for 3. It's a little artifact that you add 1 mana of any color, and you can sacrifice it later on and draw a card.
The Felwar Stone you don't see as often in just precons and things like that, but you do see it in a lot of people's decks. It's a 2 mana cost artifact that also you get to add 1 mana of any color of a land that your opponent controls or can produce. So you're stealing the colors from your opponents, which can sometimes be good and sometimes not.
Yeah, exactly. Soul Ring for 1. You get 2 mana. Everybody loves a soul ring.
Everyone loves a soul ring. Wayfarer's Bauble for 1. And you can pay 2 and tap it and sacrifice it to search your library for a basic land and put that land onto the battlefield tapped and shuffle your library. So it's just a way of searching for what you need.
Then we have this awesome card for flavor that's Dungeon Map. It's new to the new set coming out for 3. It's add a colorless mana, or you can pay 3 and venture into a dungeon. Handy dandy, but you only get to do that as a sorcery, but still use that for later on when you want to finish off that dungeon and do some dungeon shenanigans.
Yeah, you want to do dungeons in this deck. Bucknards, I think that it is. Ever full curse.
Word.
Bucknards. Okay, for 2. We grew up in the wrong era. For 1, you can tap it and roll a d4. We're both thinking the same thing. Roll a d4 and create a number of treasure tokens equal to the results. So potentially 4 treasure tokens, which is great. And then the player to your right gains control of this purse, which is fantastic. I love that this is going to go around the table. People are going to want to, share the purse around, and everyone's getting treasures.
Take one down, pass it around.
Yeah, exactly.
Then we have a component pouch for 3. It is an artifact that you can remove a component counter from the pouch and add 2 mana of different colors. So that's interesting. How do you get component counters, you say? Well, you can tap it and roll a d20. And then if you have a 1 to 9 on your results, you get to put a counter on it. If you have 10 to 20, you get to put 2 counters on it. So can't do that right away, but you can actually do the roll right away, I suppose. And tap it.
Exactly.
So, get it ready.
So then the next section, which is probably the most important section other than your high impact cards in our opinion, but that's just our opinion, is the removal section. You should have probably around 15 removal in your deck. This one has 16. Cataclysmic Gearhulk is our first one for 3 and 2 white. It is a 4/5 vigilance creature that when it enters the battlefield, each player, including yourself, chooses an artifact, a creature, an enchantment, and a planeswalker from among non-land permanents, then they control and sacrifices the rest. So it's a nice little board wipe that doesn't quite wipe everything out. And if you play this at the right time, then you keep everything that you need, and hopefully they lose a lot of stuff.
Yeah, you're going to have ways to get it back, and hopefully they can't. Mm-hmm. Then we have Sunblast Angel for 4 and 2 white. It's Leslie's favorite angels, and there's flying in this deck. Hooray, hooray. When it enters the battlefield, you destroy all tapped creatures, so that could be crazy.
Go ahead, really swing crazy. At me. Swing at me if you want.
Oh, you want to.
Ashen Rider, this is a pretty expensive one. It costs 8 for a 5/5 flyer, but when it enters the battlefield or dies, you get to exile target permanent. So there's 2 permanents you're going to get rid of with this card, which is why it costs so much. And yeah, it's a 5/5 flyer, so it's a pretty high impact card there, as well as removal.
Then we have Hostage Taker, which was one of my favorite cards in Ixalan when I wasn't playing Vampires. Human Pirate. He is a 2/3. When it enters the battlefield, you get to exile target artifact or creature and until it leaves the battlefield. But you may cast that card for as long as it remains exiled. And yeah.
Damn it, Shauna.
Yeah. Steal your stuff.
She used to do that to me all the time. Curses. A unicorn. Ronom unicorn for 2 for a 2/2. Sacrifice it to destroy target enchantment. Basic, awesome removal.
You're gonna need that against those enchantment decks. Not mentioning any names there, Leslie. Plague Crafter for 2 and a black. 3/2. It's a human shaman. When it enters the battlefield, each player sacrifices a creature or planeswalker, which is very handy. Each player who can't discards a card, so that's kind of nice too.
And for 4 and a black, you can get a Shriekmaw, which is a 3/2 with fear. Fear means this creature can't be blocked except by artifact creatures or black creatures. And when Shriekmaw enters the battlefield, you get to destroy a non-artifact, non-black creature. It also has Evoke for 1 and a black, which means that you may cast the spell for its evoke cost, and if you do, it's sacrificed when it enters the battlefield. So basically, if you want to use its ability to destroy a non-artifact, non-black creature, you're just going to cast it for its evoke cost. You don't care if it stays on the battlefield. You just need to get rid of that thing now, maybe in response to somebody putting something or wanting to make something indestructible or something like that. So yeah, it's some versatility there, which is always good.
Bring it back and do it again. Necrotic Sliver. It's for 1, a white and a black, a 2/2, and all slivers have pay 3 and sacrifice this permanent, destroy target permanent. So you just use it to get rid of stuff. I don't think there's any other slivers, if I recall, in this deck, but
I don't think so.
That's okay. You just pay the 3 and sacrifice it because they're nasty anyways.
Well, and be prepared because this is 3 mana cost. When you pay, if you play this on turn 3, people will go, slivers, you're playing slivers, even though you only have 1 in your deck. So
exactly.
People don't like slivers.
Intimidation tool.
Exactly. Meteor Golem for 7 is a 3/3, but when it enters the battlefield, you can destroy a non-land permanent an opponent controls. The nice thing about this is that it's any permanent, not just a creature or whatever. So it's a basic staple.
Necromantic Selection for 4 and 3 black. It's pretty expensive sorcery, but it destroys all creatures. Then return a creature card put into graveyard this way to the battlefield under your control. It's a black zombie in addition to its other colors and types. And then you have to exile this card. So it's a great way to steal something of theirs that's really big.
Yeah. Or even just destroy everything except bring your commander back or something like that. Like, it's great.
Yeah.
Utter End for 2 in a white and a black is just a basic instant that lets you exile target non-land permanent. I like that it's exile, not destroy, because it gets rid of those indestructible things.
Yes. And here's another one, Swords to Plowshare, same thing. Exile target creature, though, and its controller gains life equal to its power, but only for 1 white. It's a pretty standard thing to have.
Yeah. Anti-Spark for white and a black. Exile target permanent with mana value 4 or greater. So steal that Planeswalker Spark. I wish it was like, or destroy target permanent. Exile target permanent or Planeswalker.
Yeah.
Seems like it should be Planeswalker. Anyway.
Well, it says target permanent.
Oh, I guess.
So it could be Planeswalkers, yeah.
Yeah.
Could be those nasty artifacts that you're playing too. Nihilor for 2, a white, a blue, and a black, a 3/5 horror creature that when it enters the battlefield for each opponent, tap up to 1 untapped creature you control. When you do, you get to gain control of a target creature that player controls with power less than or equal to the tapped creature's power for as long as you have this guy out there. And whenever you attack with a creature an opponent owns, you gain 2 life and they lose 2 life. So you're stealing their stuff and hitting them with it, plus you're draining their life. So you're kind of, it's a horror. It's a horror creature for sure.
Horrifying. Minimus, I love this little, it's a common, but it's awesome. Minimus Containment for 2 and a white. Basically, you're going to enchant a non-land permanent and turn it into a treasure. So you can just say, hey, thought you could use something to gain mana. The thing is, since it's a treasure, in order to even use it, they got to sacrifice it to create treasure. Yeah. So that's amazing removal. I love it. It's so awesome for a common.
Then there's the Clay Golem. It is a 4/4 for 4 little golem that you pay 6 and roll a dice and make it monstrous. And that's putting a counter on it based on what you roll. And when it becomes monstrous, though, you get to destroy target permanent. So that's any permanent. So that's pretty awesome. Could be a land if you needed to.
Mm-hmm. And then we have our next section, which is card draw and tutors, anything that kind of lets you see what's going on or draw cards. The first one is a fairly high impact card in and of itself, but it is a Champion of Wits for 2 and a blue. It's a 2/1. When it enters the battlefield, you may draw cards equal to its power. So the first time it's just going to be 2. If you do, you get to discard 2 cards. However, if someone does happen to kill this, you're going to internalize it for 6, which means that you're going to exile it from your graveyard and create a copy of it, except it's a 4/4 zombie, but it has the same ability. So then you're going to draw 4 cards and discard 2. Mm-hmm. So it's just a really good card draw that happens twice.
And then kind of going along with that is the Curator of Mysteries for 2 and 2 blue. It's a 4/4 flyer. And whenever you cycle or discard another card, you get to scry 1. So you can use that discarding to help you scry. And you can also just cycle this one for just a blue and then bring it back later on when you need it. So that's kind of handy.
Yeah. And Baleful Strix for a blue and a black is a 1/1. It's a flying death touch. And when it enters the battlefield, you draw a card. So, I mean, it just kind of brings you another card to your hand when you play it, and there's nothing wrong with having a little death toucher on the battlefield to keep them from attacking.
Especially flying. Keep Leslie off of you. Wall of Omens for 1 and a white. It's a 0/4 defender, and when it enters the battlefield, you draw a card. Mm-hmm. So that's a great way to get your cards.
Merfolk Looter for 2. It's a 1/1. You get to tap it, draw a card, then discard a card. I like this one because it has continual card draw.
Mm-hmm. Muldrifter for 4 and a blue. It's a 2/2 flyer. When it enters the battlefield, you draw 2 cards, or you can evoke it for 2 and a blue and cast it for less. That less cost, but you have to sacrifice it as it when it finishes entering the battlefield. So it's a great card to flash in and out somehow if you can.
And then we have a Murder of Crows, which I question the color choice of these crows, but whatever. To each their own. 3 and 2 blue for a 4/4 flyer. Now, when another creature dies, you may draw a card. If you do, discard a card. And it doesn't say when another creature you control dies. So when their creatures dies. It's also a May ability, so you can use it if you want to use it, and it's a 4/4. This is a great card.
Yeah. Cloud Blazer, it's a 2/2 for 3, a white and a blue, and it's a flyer as well. But when it enters the battlefield, you gain 2 life and draw 2 cards, so that's nice as well.
I didn't realize this deck had so many flyers. Now I want it even more. Obsessive Stitcher for 1 and a blue and a black is a human wizard, 0/3. You can tap it to draw a card, then discard a card. So again, one of those cards that just is continual card draw if you need it. You can also pay 2 and a blue and a black to sacrifice it and return target creature card from your graveyard to the battlefield. So it doesn't matter how much that cost, you just return something right to the battlefield. Great card.
One of your big expensive ones for 4.
Yeah.
Awesome. Forbidden Alchemy for 2 and a white or blue. It's an instant that you can look at the top 4 cards of your library, put one of them into your hand and the rest into your graveyard. And then you've got flashback on it, which you pay 6 and a black, and you can cast it again from your graveyard, but you have to exile it after.
Vanish into Memory is an instant for 2 and a white and a blue. You get to exile target creature, which is removal as well. You may draw cards equal to that creature's power, and at the beginning of your next upkeep, return that card to the battlefield under its owner's control. If you do, discard cards equal to the creature's toughness. So there is some decisions that need to be made of whether you want what you want to enter the battlefield again, and knowing that you're going to have to discard cards as many as you drew. So yeah, but it's a nice little dig through your deck card.
Yeah, and you can get their stuff out of the way if you need to get through or whatever too.
Exactly.
Nice. Arcane Endeavor, it's for 5 and 2 blue, a sorcery. I think it's a new card. You roll 2d8 and choose one result. You draw cards equal to that result. Then you may cast an instant or sorcery spell with mana value less than or equal to the result from the other dice. You can do that without paying its mana cost. So yeah, my gosh, that could be nuts. Mana value. So so D8. Yeah, you're rolling D8. Whew.
Potentially 8, right?
Yeah. Whew.
So now we move into the high impact cards. Our formula that we go by suggests that you should have 12. This deck has 9, but as you saw before, some of those high impact cards fit into other categories, so it does have more than 9. And essentially, if you can find high impact cards that fit into all of those categories, that's even better anyway. So the first one, though, that we are talking about is Eternal Dragon. This has a dragon in it as well. Oh, it was meant for me. 5 and 2 white for a flying 5/5, and you can pay 3 and 2 white to return it from your graveyard to your hand. Activate this ability only during your upkeep. So after you've untapped, you can do that. And it also has Plane Cycle, which means that you can pay 2, discard it, and search your library for a Plains card and reveal it. So if you're discarding it, you can then return it from your graveyard to your hand. So you get the card draw, and then you return it, and then you can keep returning it. So this is going to be a perpetual thing that everyone's going to hate. I love it.
Yeah, a little bit of ramp there until you can do something with it, right?
Yeah.
Sun Titan for 4 and 2 white. It's a 6/6 vigilance. Everybody loves to hate this card as well, because whenever it enters the battlefield or attacks, you may return target permanent card with mana value 3 or less from your graveyard to the battlefield. Could be your lands, could be your artifacts that you sacrificed to draw cards.
Yeah, and I think if you remember the mana curve, there's 20 cards, 3 mana value in this, and 11 at 2 and 4. So there's a lot that you could potentially return. Radiant Solar, which is an angel with flying and lifelink for 5 and a white. And when it or another non-token creature enters the battlefield under your control, you get to venture into a dungeon. So
here we go.
We're back to venturing again. There was hardly anything so far. You can also discard it and venture into a dungeon and gain 3 life if you want. So if you don't really need her on the battlefield for whatever reason, or you think you can return her from the battlefield, or return her from the graveyard to the battlefield, then that's fine too. So yeah, this will do some work for you.
Revive a 5 for 2 and a white. It's an instant where you can roll a d20 and add the number of creature cards in your graveyard that were put there from the battlefield this turn. So second main phase, you probably want to do that. So if you roll 1 to 14, you return all creature cards in your graveyard that were put there from the battlefield to your hand. Or 15 plus, you return them to the battlefield. Ooh.
I just play that right after someone has done a board wipe and thinks that, and then you roll a 15 or higher. And does it say you get to add the number of cards creatures? So yeah. So if you had like a full thing, and you, even if you rolled a 10 and you only had 5 creatures on the battlefield, you automatically get them back to the battlefield.
Mm-hmm.
It's awesome. I love that.
It is.
Thorough Investigation for 2 and a white is an enchantment, and whenever you attack, you get to investigate, which means you create a clue token. So clues are really cool because you can pay 2 and sacrifice it to draw a card, so you get some card draw out of them. And then whenever you sacrifice a clue, you get to venture into a dungeon. So another support for your commander, getting those dungeons done when you need them.
Yeah, and that's an enchantment. Oh wow, okay, I didn't notice that was an enchantment. Phantom Steed for 3 and a blue. It's a 4/3 with Flash Horse Illusion. When it enters the battlefield, exile another target creature you control until Phantom Stallion or Steed leaves the battlefield. Whenever it attacks, you create a tapped and attacking token that's a copy of your exiled creature, except in its illusion. In addition to its other types, sacrifice that token at the end of combat. So yeah, use it to just keep using your awesome creature that has enter the battlefield triggers every single time, and keep swinging with the darn thing over and over again.
Oof. Yeah, and it doesn't matter because you're exiling at the end of turn. Basically, you're protecting you're just attacking with the original instead.
Yeah.
Right? Wand of Orchid. I believe this one's new as well. 2 and a black for a legendary artifact equipment. When equipped creature attacks or blocks, it and zombies you control gain death touch until the end of turn. So nobody's going to want to block it. And whenever a equipped creature deals combat damage to a player, you get to create that many 2/2 black zombie creature tokens. So they're going to want to block it, but they're not going to want to block it because it has death touch. But if it gets through, especially if it's a big beefy dude, you're going to create that many 2/2 black zombies. So it's a really great way for your board to go wide.
Midnight Pathlighter for 2 and a white and a blue. It's a 2/3 human wizard, and creatures you control can't be blocked except by legendary creatures. Ooh. All creatures you control. Whenever one or more creatures you control deal combat damage to a player, you get to venture into the dungeon. You could potentially finish a dungeon on one turn.
Yeah, awesome. Because it's for each, because it says whenever one or more deals combat damage, that means every creature that did combat damage you venture with, right?
One or more creatures you control deal.
Or is it just once?
One or more you control deal combat damage to a player venture.
I believe that means for each creature.
Just yeah.
Because that's like a Johnny's Pride Mate. Whenever you gain life, which if you gain life with 3 creatures, you get to 3 counters.
Yeah. I think so.
We'll have to look that up.
I'll have to confirm that.
And confirm that. But Pashar, Ruinseeker for 1 and a white and a blue is a 2/3, and this one allows room abilities of dungeons that you own to trigger an additional time. So if your room says scry 1, you're going to scry 1, and then you're going to scry 1 again.
Yay. Then we're moving on to other cards that are on theme, other special cards, and the formula calls for about 10. The deck has about 13. Again, these can bop around a little bit as removal or whatever. So there's the Karmic Guide for 3 and 2 white. It's a 2/2 that has flying and protection from black. It also has Echo, which is for 3 and the 2 white. At the beginning of your upkeep, if this came under your control since the beginning of your last upkeep, you have to sacrifice it unless you pay its Echo cost. And when it enters the battlefield, you return target creature card from your graveyard to the battlefield. So this is one of those cards that you might want to bounce back and forth and have going in and out as much as possible. So returning other stuff. Graveyard to the battlefield.
And if we remember our command, we go back and remind ourselves what our commander does. It's whenever one or more creature cards is put into a graveyard from anywhere, venture into a dungeon. So you want things to go into your graveyard and to bring them back again. So that is the point, exactly.
Yeah.
So a Phantasmal Image for 1 and a blue is a 0/0, and when it enters the battlefield, you can have it copy any creature on the battlefield except it's an illusion into addition to its other types. When this creature becomes a target of a spell or ability, you sacrifice it. So it would go to the graveyard, which helps your commander, and you can choose anything on the battlefield, whether it be your creature or their creature, to copy, which is sometimes really frustrating for them.
Doomed Necromancer. It's a 2/2 for 2 and a black, a human cleric mercenary that you can pay a black and sacrifice it and return a creature card from your graveyard to the battlefield. That's a really, really cheap way to get something big.
Yeah.
It
doesn't matter. Card. Yeah, it doesn't matter if it goes to the graveyard, because so swing, be aggressive. Yeah. Reassembling Skeleton. This is a fantastic card for this deck. For 2, it's a 1/1, and basically you can use it as a little blocker. It's going to die, but then you're going to return it from your graveyard to the battlefield, and it can die, and you just keep venturing into dungeons and getting all the benefits from all these decks.
Unburial Rites for 4 and a black. It's a sorcery that you can return target creature card from your graveyard to the battlefield. Doesn't matter what it is. Flashback 3 and a white, so you get to do it again. Do that twice, and you're running over everybody.
And then Victimize for 2 and a black is a sorcery. You choose 2 target creature cards in your graveyard, sacrifice a creature, and if you do, return the chosen cards to the battlefield tapped. So again, another great way to sacrifice something little and bring 2 creatures back that might have been a lot bigger.
Yeah. Then we've got the Lightning Greaves for 2, and that is equipped creature has haste and shroud. So yeah, equip is 0. It's just a great way to protect your creature and get in there for some damage and kill someone.
Yeah. And Propaganda. Creatures can't attack you unless their controller pays 2 for each creature they control that's attacking you. So this is a good way to slow them down for those aggressive decks as you're trying to set things up and get things in your graveyard so that you can kind of take over the game midway through. They have to kind of pay in order to attack you.
Then we have a movable rod for white. It's a little artifact that you may choose not to untap this little rod during its during your untap step. And the reason for that is whenever it becomes untapped, you venture into the dungeon, and you can pay 3 and a white and tap this. For as long as it remains tapped, you get another target permanent, loses all abilities, and can't attack or block. So it kind of depends on what you need. Do you need to go through the dungeon, or do you need to keep something of theirs under wraps? Kind of just play it
has some politics that you can do to it too, because you can say, hey Shauna, if I let your dude go, can you just not attack me for it for a bit, and then I'll deal with so and so over there that just put this crazy thing out on the battlefield.
Yeah.
So Min the Wily Illusionist is another new card for 1 and 2 blue, 1/3. I love the art on this card. It's so cute. It's got like a little brain with feet, and she's like, she looks like she's holding a magic card as she's going, actually. Anyway, whenever you draw your second card each turn, you get to create a 1/1 blue illusion creature token. With this creature gets +1/+0 for each other illusion you control. So the more illusions you have, the bigger they are. Whenever an illusion you control dies, you may put a permanent card with mana value less than or equal to that creature's power from your hand onto the battlefield. So this has the potential to get really crazy, really fast, but it also will die to a removal fairly quickly. So hopefully, if you see this, you'll deal with it early and not late.
Grave Endeavor for 5 and 2 black. It's an instant where you roll 2d10 and choose one result. Return a creature card from your graveyard to the battlefield with a number of +1/+1 counters on it equal to that result. And then each opponent loses X life and you gain X life, where X is the other result. Ouch. Mean.
Yeah, it is mean, but super fun. This next one is super fun too. I love this card. I think this one's going to see some play for sure. So Rod of Absorption for 2 and a blue. It's an artifact. And when a player, any player, including yourself, casts an instant or sorcery spell, instead of it going into the graveyard as it resolves, you're going to exile it, probably under the Rod of Absorption, so you remember which ones you have. So then you can pay X and tap it and sacrifice Rod of Absorption, and you can cast any number of those spells from among those cards that are exiled with Rod of Absorption with a total mana value of X. So basically, you're just going to keep absorbing all of those spells until you decide you're going to put a whole bunch of mana into it. Let's say you have 20 mana on the battlefield, you've absorbed all these spells. You tap them all, and then you just play all these instants and sorceries that you've absorbed. It has the potential. I can see this making some shenanigan decks for sure.
Yeah. Then we have Extract Brain, which is X and a blue and a black sorcery. Target opponent chooses X cards from their hand. You get to look at those cards, and you may cast a spell from among them without paying its mana cost. Oh boy.
Free spells.
That could be bad.
So we're not going to go too far into the land. You can take a look at the land base. Of course, all land bases can be tweaked. You can put more expensive land in there if you want. There's some good lands in there, some basic lands, and there's some utility lands that you see in every deck. So definitely check those out. Our formula suggests 34. This deck has 39, so there is room for tweaking there. Again, pay attention to your mana curve and don't take out too many of the basics. But that's where you can start tweaking, as well as some of your other cards on theme that maybe just are filler cards. You could tweak with those. So tweaks is actually our next section. And Shauna, what's our first tweak for the people?
The first one is this. We were thinking that we need a few more adventure type cards, just in case we don't have our commander out or whatever reason. So Triumphant Adventurers for a white and a black, a little 1/1 with Death Touch. So that's kind of nice to have. And then as long as it's your turn, it has first strike. So you could be swinging with it. And whenever it attacks, you get to venture into the dungeon. So it's not like he necessarily has to get through, but chances are he's gonna. And doesn't matter. You get to venture into the dungeon regardless of whether he does damage or not.
Yeah, because with first strike, they're not going to want to block them.
Yeah.
Fate's Reversal is another one that kind of helps with that venturing. We figured, like, if you're going to venture, as Shauna said, if you're going to make a dungeon deck, let's make a dungeon deck. So Fate's Reversal for 1 and a black is a sorcery. You get to return up to 1 target creature card from your graveyard to your hand, which fits that whole playing from your graveyard thing. On top of that, you get to venture into the dungeon. So it helps with both.
And Leslie spotted this wonderful card that says fly for 1 blue. You enchant a creature and that creature gets flying. Hooray! And whenever this creature deals combat damage to a player, venture into the dungeon. So yeah, having a flyer is chances are it's going to get through, and you get to venture, not adventure, when you get a chance there.
And something that you might want to give flying to is this Acererak, the Archlich from Tomb of Annihilation. He is 2 and a black for a 5/5, and when he enters the battlefield, if you have completed Tomb of Annihilation, you get to return. If if you haven't recreated, or if you haven't completed Tomb of Annihilation, return Astarak the Archlich to its owner's hand and venture into the dungeon. So this is a great way to, you're playing your little 5/5. Oops, I haven't completed Tomb of Annihilation yet, but that's okay. It's just going to go back to my hand, and I'm going to either start that dungeon or keep going through that dungeon. That dungeon happens to have 3 rooms to completion if you decide to go along the right side. So you're going to finish it by the time you get to have him on the battlefield. Then when it attacks, for each opponent, you create a 2/2 black zombie creature token unless that player sacrifices a creature. So they're going to have to make some choices. You're going to make some zombies, and yeah. And tokens hit the graveyard when they die as well. So
Barrowin of Clan Undur. It's a little 3/3 dwarf cleric for 2, a white and a black, that has, when it enters the battlefield, you get to venture into the dungeon. It's a great little guy to be flipping back and forth. Whenever it attacks, you return up to 1 creature card with mana value 3 or less from your graveyard to the battlefield if you've completed a dungeon. So yeah, chances are you're going to have that dungeon completed. Hopefully.
And Clattering Skeleton for 3 and a black would be another great one. Not only is it a 4/3 skeleton, when it dies, you're going to venture into a dungeon. If you have your commander out on the battlefield, that's going to trigger as well. So you get to venture twice. And again, you're just, once you complete a dungeon, you just create another dungeon, and you just keep going through and cycling and getting all these benefits. And so we can go through all of the dungeons in a second here, but there's some really cool things that can be done with all of those dungeons.
Yeah. And then Dungeon Descent, it enters the battlefield tapped, but it's a land, a special land from this set that you could pay for and tap an untapped legendary creature that you have. So like your commander, and you can venture into the dungeon, activating as a sorcery, of course, but it's a great way to get a little bit more venturing happening as well. So
yeah. And then Nador, Selfless Paladin, is another great one. So 2 and a white for a 3/3 with Vigilance. When it enters the battlefield or attacks, you get to venture into a dungeon. And then other creatures you control get +1/+1 as long as you've completed a dungeon. So let's take advantage of completing those dungeons and put some cards that gain benefits or give your other creatures benefits because of that. Plus, it's a Vigilance one. So it's pretty great.
We were also thinking that you might want some counter spells that can maybe do something for you as well. So Countervailing Winds, it's for 2 and a blue, and you can counter target spell unless its controller pays 1 for each card in your graveyard. So with this deck, you're probably going to have lots in your graveyard, so that's kind of nice. Or you can just cycle it for 2, which you might want to do as well. So
yeah, trying to protect those creatures or bring them back from the graveyard if you can. So Soul Manipulation does the same. 1 in a black and a blue for choosing 1 or both. I love that this is 1 or both because, of course, you can choose both if you have targets. So counter target creature spell, and then return target creature card from your graveyard to your hand. So yeah, just play them again, Sam.
And speaking of, we have another card that lets you Call of the Death Dweller. It's for 2 and a black, a sorcery that you can return up to 2 target creature cards with total converted mana cost of 3 or less. We have lots of them from your graveyard to the battlefield, and you put a Death Touch counter on either of them and a Menace counter on either of them. So it could just be 1 if you want. So that's really handy.
And our final tweak suggestion is Planar Ally with the 3/3 flyer, and when it attacks, you get to venture into a dungeon. Anything that has evasion and also benefits your deck is great. It does cost 5, so it's a little bit higher mana cost. But again, it's a nice little mid-range card that you could add to this deck if you wanted to take advantage of the venturing. So, yeah.
So that's it for this time. We hope you've had a great time, or we hope you have a great time playing this deck. We certainly will. Let us know how you would tweak it, and if you like what you saw, make sure you hit the like and subscribe button for us. And you can also find us live on Twitch 3 times a week, so come and hang out with us there. And And you can also reach out to us on Twitter if you want to say hello. Where one of us is usually there, so come on over. And until next time,
tap those magic cards and have fun doing it. Bye, guys.
Thanks. Bye.